We are waiting for you in the dark.
This story goes back a ways, 2009 or 2010 if I had to guess. Hard to believe that's more than a decade ago now. My girlfriend Leia and I decided to drive out to Arizona to visit her mom and some of her family on the Navajo reservation. Our friend Shannon came along, she's Native American as well. We didn't pull in until after dark, and out there, with no electricity or running water, night is absolute. The sky looked unreal. The stars were so bright it felt like we were sitting under a planetarium dome. Even now I can still picture it. It was like nature wanted to show off something beautiful before throwing something twisted at us. Shannon wanted to swing by and visit her friend Lucy, who also lived on the res, so we all went over. Lucy's hogan was small and traditional, and when we stepped inside it was like walking into another world. Packed earth floor, the air smelling faintly of dust and kerosene. The only light came from a couple of dim lanterns. I'd never been in a traditional Navajo hogan before, so the whole thing fascinated me. After we'd been talking for a while, Leia asked where the bathroom was. "You can use the outhouse out back," Lucy said, "but be careful. People have been seeing mountain lions around." Then she looked at me. "You hear?" She handed me a .357 revolver and a handful of rounds. "Go with her, just in case." I was thrilled, honestly. I've always liked handguns and I knew how to use them. I loaded up the cylinder, snapped it shut, and we stepped out into the night. The stars were bright enough to outline the gravel path to the outhouse. I stayed on edge, expecting a mountain lion to come tearing out from behind a juniper at any second. The silence was wrong. Too complete. When the smaller animals go quiet in the desert, it usually means something big is hunting. I tightened my grip on the revolver. Something moved in the brush, just at the edge of my vision, but it was so dark I couldn't tell if I was imagining it. The last thing I wanted was to blow away somebody's dog on Navajo land. Then another thing hit me, the smell. The air reeked like a year's worth of bedpans dumped out and left to bake in the summer sun. It was the kind of stench that would knock most people flat. Leia didn't seem to notice at all. She finished up and we started back. That's when something shot out of the brush and cut across our path. I snapped the revolver up but didn't fire. It was too quick, I couldn't be sure what I was aiming at, and I was already uneasy about walking around the res armed. Unless a mountain lion was actively trying to tear us apart, I didn't want to pull that trigger. We made it back to the hogan. I unloaded the revolver and handed it to Lucy. Her kids were there. The space felt even smaller with all of us inside. She was friendly enough, but I got the impression she didn't want us hanging around too long. That was fine. We still needed to drive over and see Shannon's mom. Shannon's mother is Hopi and lives in a different area of the reservation. If you know anything about the history between the Hopi and Navajo, you'll understand there's not exactly a lot of love between the tribes. Navigating the res is rough if you're not from there. Directions from locals tend to sound like, turn right at the old red tire, then left at the fork. And the Navajo Nation is huge, 27,000 square miles of mostly dirt roads. Scrub and brush block your line of sight in every direction. Getting lost is easy. We had Shannon with us, and even she was having a hard time finding the Hopi territory. As I drove, I kept thinking I saw something pacing us in the brush, just little glimpses of movement running parallel to the car. Then something burst out of the dark and slammed into the side of the car. Holy shit, what the fuck was that? I stomped on the brakes, heart hammering, sure I'd hit a person. Shannon leaned forward from the back and grabbed my shoulder. "Don't get out, just go, we need to go." "You don't think I should check?" I turned to look at her and my voice died. My lips actually started to tremble on their own. Through the back window, something was crouched in the red glow of our taillights. It was tall, but hunched at an angle that didn't look human. I saw what looked like an animal pelt hanging over its shoulders, then two glowing white eyes came into view. "Oh, go fuck yourself," I said and slammed my foot down on the gas. Gravel sprayed behind us as we shot forward. I checked the rear view, hoping I'd imagined it. No such luck. Something huge was racing after us and it was gaining. So I hadn't been seeing things in the brush earlier. It suddenly leapt, vanishing from the mirror. I knew exactly where it was going to land. I hit the brakes just before it came down in front of us. It straightened up and all three of us got a clear look. From the waist down, it had long, human-like legs. Above that, a muscular torso streaked and marked with black and red designs. Its head was pure animal, like a mountain lion twisted into something wrong. Its eyes glowed white, its mouth full of sharp canines, lips pulled back in something that almost looked like a grin. "Get us the fuck out of here," Shannon screamed. I dropped the car into reverse and floored it, the tires skidding. We almost went off the road, but I swung the wheel hard, spun the car, and got us facing the opposite direction. A little maneuver I picked up in my park ranger training for exactly this kind of get-the-hell-out-fast scenario. We tore back the way we'd come. I kept checking the mirror, half expecting to see that thing right behind us. Seeing nothing was somehow worse. Eventually, we reached the paved highway that runs toward Tuba City. I turned left. "I think we lost it," I said. Right then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it again, running through the trees alongside us, keeping pace. The road was paved but rough, full of potholes and rocks. Still, I could finally get enough speed to pull away from it. Just before I left it behind, it lunged from the tree line and smashed into the car again, almost sending us into a ditch. I fought the wheel and managed to keep us on the road. We all went cold when we heard it scream, a long, furious wail that cut through the roar of the engine even with the windows up. I've dealt with some serious shit in my life, but nothing has ever put the fear of God in me like that sound. We didn't slow down until we hit Tuba City. I topped off the tank at a gas station, then we took the long way around to get to Shannon's mom. When we finally arrived, Shannon pulled her mom aside and told her what happened in a low, urgent voice. Leia and I just stood there, not sure what to do or say. We'd come face to face with something ancient, a skinwalker. Not many people get that close and live to talk about it. Shannon's mom burned sage and prayed over us. None of us slept that night. The next story happened about 4 years ago in a little town called Kingwood just outside Houston. I was 12 then, and I had a big group of friends I biked with almost every day. On this particular day, my buddy Jake and I planned to ride deep into the woods to find a place we'd heard rumors about, a cave everyone called the Cave of Hell. A few older kids at school had mentioned it. They said people had gone missing around there. Supposedly something lived inside the cave and came out at night, stalking the forest, looking for anyone dumb enough to be out walking. Our imaginations went into overdrive. We pedaled to the main trail system. The entrance was just a small gate leading into an overgrown parking lot that hadn't seen maintenance in years. Tall grass and branches hung over cracked pavement. Several trailheads started along one side. Off in the far left corner was an old shed that always creeped me out. The directions we'd been given were clear enough. Take the far right trail for about a quarter mile until you hit a fork. Go left, walk a few minutes, cave will be right there. As we rolled into the abandoned lot, a heavy uneasiness settled over me. It felt like eyes were on us from somewhere in all that overgrowth. Still, we found the right trail and followed it. A little while later, we hit the fork. By then the sun was dropping fast. We stashed our bikes in the bushes and started down the left path on foot. The deeper we went, the darker it got. The sky seemed to dim quicker than it should have, like the woods themselves were warning us to turn back. Part of me was scared of what might be in that forest. The other part was thinking about my parents and how dead I'd be if I missed curfew. Another minute of walking and we saw it, the Cave of Hell. It yawned open right at the edge of a steep drop. The area was strewn with empty beer bottles and tagged with graffiti. For some reason, that made me feel a little better. If other people had been here partying and spray painting the place, they clearly weren't all getting ripped apart. Jake started heading in immediately, tugging on my shirt. "What's your problem?" he asked. "Come on, there is no way in hell I'm going in there," I said, "but that's why we're out here." Yeah, and that was before I saw it with my own eyes. I've had a bad feeling this whole time, plus it smells like something died in there. "Well, I'm going in, you can stay out here and piss your pants." Jake had always been a daredevil. The kind of guy who'd grow up to be a skydiver or a stuntman. I watched him vanish into the dark opening. I sat on some nearby rocks and waited, trying not to think about what might be happening in there. Time dragged, I checked my phone. Curfew was coming up fast, my stomach knotted. Getting grounded for a month felt like a more concrete threat than whatever I was imagining in the cave. "Hey Jake, we gotta go," I yelled into the darkness. Silence, I tried again, louder. Still nothing. Annoyance started to outrun my fear. I flopped back down on the rocks and pulled up a game on my phone to distract myself. That's when I heard it, a scream echoing out of the cave, followed by a noise that sounded like howling. I was on my feet in an instant. A second later, I heard Jake yelling like his life depended on it. Go, we need to get the fuck out of here now." something behind him screeched and howled, closer than I wanted to imagine. I was already running by the time Jake erupted from the cave mouth. I didn't want to look back, but I did. All I remember is a shape at the entrance tall, with antlers silhouetted against the dim light. My first thought was moose, but moose don't rear up and stand like that. We ran harder than we ever had in our lives, pounding back along the trail. Whatever was in that cave screamed again, and the sound followed us through the trees. We burst out of the woods, grabbed our bikes, and tore out of there, pedaling so fast my legs went numb. We didn't even realize until later that we'd left our phones behind. Mine had slipped from my hands when I jumped up off the rocks. I was too terrified to stoop down and grab it. Jake must have dropped his somewhere inside the cave. The ride home is a blur. By the time we reached my house, my parents had already called the cops. We told them and the officers that some kind of animal had chased us in the forest. The fear on our faces sold the story. An animal had chased us technically, but it wasn't anything that belonged on this planet. After that night, Jake and I drifted apart. A few years later, he overdosed, died. I never got the full story about what he saw in that cave before he turned and ran. Whatever it was, I think it scarred him, and he tried to drown it with drugs. We never went back for our phones. There was no way in hell we were stepping foot near that place again. I moved away from Kingwood a year later. Aside from attending Jake's funeral, I haven't been back. Growing up, my parents banned cartoons, said they'd rot my brain, so I ended up watching a lot of shows about monsters, aliens, and the paranormal instead, probably not an upgrade. I remember lying in bed some nights, wired and exhausted, too afraid to close my eyes after whatever I just watched. My neighborhood is small but surrounded by thick woods. There are houses around, sure, but behind mine is nothing but forest. When night hits, the dark just swallows everything. If I had to take the trash out after sundown or get home from a late shift around 2 in the morning, I'd sprint to the door, fumbling with my keys, half expecting something from those TV shows to come lunging out of the shadows. I'm in my last years of college now. You'd think I'd have grown out of that kind of fear. I hadn't, not after what happened that night. About 3 years ago, some of my relatives from Europe came to visit family I have up in Vermont. My parents decided to drive up a day early. I had classes, so the plan was for me to follow the next evening and meet them there for spring break. I came home after class, packed a bag, and punched the address into my GPS. At first it said 6 hours, then it recalculated, warning about heavy traffic from construction. The ETA jumped to 8.5. Fantastic. I left around 8 p.m., hoping that by the time I hit any work zones they'd be empty or at least moving. About an hour in, I stopped at a BJ's convenience store to grab snacks and soda and top off the tank. With that out of the way, I settled into the drive. 1 hour down, I thought. What's another 7? Eventually, I merged onto I-91. Nearly 3 hours later, I reached a long stretch of highway under construction near Greenfield, Massachusetts. Even though nobody was actively working at that hour, cones narrowed the lanes and there were a few big excavators parked off the shoulder. A cop had someone pulled over right in one of the constricted spots, which slowed everyone to a crawl. I hate slow driving. Right then my GPS chimed and suggested a faster route. Get off at the next exit, cut west along some smaller state roads for a few dozen miles, then rejoin the highway. Supposedly it would shave a couple of hours off the drive. I took the exit. What I got was an empty, twisting road through the middle of nowhere. It was close to 1 a.m. And I started thinking about how I was going to sneak into my relative's house without waking everyone. The first hour and a half down those back roads passed without incident. Then I started seeing signs for Dover, Vermont. The name tickled something in the back of my mind, but I couldn't place it. My GPS said I had about 90 miles left. Good news, except I'd somehow taken a wrong turn and ended up on a rough, narrow back road. Potholes, frost heaves, dense trees pressed in close from both sides. If something happened out here, nobody would be there to help. Then the GPS signal dropped, of course. I pulled over and tried to mentally retrace my last few turns, hoping I could backtrack to the main road. It was after 2 a.m. now, about 20 degrees outside. A heavy, cold feeling settled in my chest, not just from the temperature. It felt like the woods were full of eyes. Demons, monsters, ghosts, every creature I'd ever seen on those TV shows felt suddenly, horribly possible. On top of that, I suddenly realized I had to piss like crazy. I made things worse by turning the car off without thinking, then stepping out into the cold. As I relieved myself, I kept my back pressed to the car, irrationally afraid that something was going to grab me from behind. That has always been one of my worst fears. As my eyes adjusted to the dark, I caught the smell, rot, heavy and sour, like death was soaked into the trees. Then I saw the marks. Several trunks near the roadside had long, deep gouges in them. Not the kind of scratches kids carve with knives. These were big, savage gashes, as if something powerful had dragged claws down the bark. That was when my survival instinct finally kicked in. I zipped up, practically dove into the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine cranked but didn't catch. Once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th try, my 20-year-old car finally roared to life. The relief lasted about 2 seconds, right up until I remembered I was still stranded in the middle of nowhere with no GPS and no cell reception. I made a U-turn, my headlights sweeping across the scarred trees again. As they swung back toward the road, they lit up something moving between the trunks. I hit the brakes. There was a figure out there, human-shaped at least. I hesitated, mind spinning. Was it someone who needed help or someone waiting to rob me? I rolled my window down a crack as the figure drew closer, staying within the beam of my headlights. When he was about 30 feet away, I could tell it was a man. I opened my mouth to say something, but he shouted first, "Run, there's something evil in these woods, don't worry about me." "Just get the hell out of here." He staggered into the full glare of my headlights and my heart nearly stopped. His left arm was gone, ripped off, and blood darkened the front of his clothes. For a split second I thought it had to be a prank, some sick setup, but as he got closer I could see the ragged wound in the way he moved. This was real. My brain shut down and my body took over. I floored the accelerator and shot away, his words echoing in my ears. I felt sick leaving him there, but what was I supposed to do? I couldn't fight whatever had done that to him. I pushed the car up around 90. Time stretched and warped. Every shadow on the side of the road looked like it might lunge into my headlights. Was it one of the things I'd seen on TV? Was that what he meant by something evil? Then it hit me why Dover sounded so familiar, the Dover demon. The story from the 70s or 80s where a college kid saw some weird humanoid creature by the side of the road around here. Now I was right in the middle of its territory. And something had just torn a man's arm off. I flew back toward what I hoped was the main road. I reached a intersection and stopped just long enough to look both ways. Left, nothing. Right, I screamed. Something was staring in at me through the passenger window. It was pale and hunched, its body all wrong. There was a hollow indentation where its solar plexus should have been. Its ribs seemed to cave inward instead of out. Its head was completely hairless, the temples jutting sharply. Deep black pits sat where its eyes should have been, but there was something in there, something that wasn't human. 2 small holes took the place of a nose. Its mouth was the worst part, sagging lips pulled away from jagged, knife-like teeth. A whole row of them, like someone had jammed kitchen blades into its gums. All of that burned into my memory in the instant our eyes met. I slammed my foot on the gas. The tires squealed and my car shot forward. I must have clipped its foot or leg because it let out a sound I still hear in nightmares. It was somewhere between a deranged human scream and a horse getting shot in the chest. I might have actually shit myself when I heard it. The chase was on. The thing ran after the car. I watched it in the rear view, horrified at how fast it moved. On the straightaways I could pull away, but the road twisted and turned, forcing me to slow down or risk crashing. I knew if I wrecked, that thing would rip me apart in seconds and no one would ever find me. I hit a fork in the road and took the right turn, the path straightening out as I crossed a bridge. I floored it, the speedometer creeping past 110. For a second I thought I might finally be outpacing it. Then I glanced in the mirror and saw something that made my blood run colder. 5 more figures crawled out from under the bridge and joined the first one, all of them sprinting after me. A morbid thought flashed through my mind. If they caught up, I was going to take the knife out of my glove compartment and end my own life before I let them do it for me. I wouldn't get to say goodbye to my parents or my relatives waiting in Vermont, but at least I'd die on my terms. The 6 twisted shapes behind me grew larger in the mirror. I could hear them shrieking, their voices overlapping in a horrible chorus. I reached toward the glove box, fingers brushing the handle, when something at the side of the road caught my eye, a sign for the on-ramp back to Interstate 91, my way out. I cranked the wheel, nearly losing control as I shot up the ramp, labeled for I-95 on the sign, but I didn't give a damn what number it was at that point. I blew through a yield sign and actually went the wrong way down the highway for about 500 feet before swerving across and turning around. It was almost 4 in the morning. The highway was nearly empty. the creatures followed, scrambling up the same ramp and onto the interstate. But instead of continuing after me, they veered off toward another car in the distance. The driver must have seen them because his exhaust roared as he floored it. His car was a lot faster than mine. I watched from far behind as he pulled away, forcing the things to give up and vanish back into the trees. My phone buzzed back to life. Signal again. I checked the map. 30 miles left. I drove the rest of the way with my eyes constantly flicking to the mirrors, certain I'd see those hollow black sockets peering back at me. My relatives had left the garage door open for me. I pulled in, shut it behind me, and just sat there shaking. Nausea rolled through me. When I finally glanced at the clock mounted on the garage wall, it read 3:52 a.m. I thought that was the end of it. It was. Over the next few days, I actually managed to relax. I spent time with my family, did the usual touristy things, drank too much with my uncles one night. The horror of that drive started to fade, pushed down by normal life. On the morning of my last full day there, I woke up early around 7, nursing a mild hangover. I suddenly got it into my head that I should buy my European relatives some cheesy going-away gifts. Chances were it'd be another decade before we saw each other again. I forced myself out of bed, got dressed, and drove to the local Walmart. I parked off to the side of the store, went in, grabbed a few cards and small items, paid, and headed for the exit. As I rounded the corner toward my car, I froze. Beyond the edge of the parking lot, near the tree line, stood the man with one arm. He stared right at me. "They're coming for you," he called out. Every alarm bell in my brain went off at once. How had he found me here? How was he even alive after what I'd seen? And what was he, really? I turned and bolted back into the store. I found a bench inside and sat there for about 45 minutes, heart pounding, watching the sliding doors like something was going to come through them. When I finally worked up the nerve to go back out, the tree line was empty. The man was gone. I drove back to my relative's place and made it in time for brunch. I didn't mention what I'd seen. That evening we said our goodbyes and I followed my parents back to New Jersey, sticking to I-91 and the main routes, no back roads, no shortcuts. When I got home, I started digging online, trying to find anything that matched what I'd seen. Eventually, I came across stories of creatures called skinwalkers, witches that could change shape. They could mimic human voices and even appear human to lure people in. That realization turned my stomach. The thing that had warned me might not have been a victim, it might have been one of them. Time passed, nothing else happened. The following year, I got into med school in Boston. I was thrilled, city streets, bright lights, crowds, a buffer between me and whatever roamed the woods at night. Even so, driving alone after dark still puts me on edge. I'm wary of every stranger I pass. If you take anything from this, let it be this: be careful driving lonely back roads at night. You have no idea what might be pacing you in the dark. My name is Will, and I grew up in a small town called Southampton in western Massachusetts. What I'm about to tell you is, to the best of my memory, completely true. It happened to me and a group of friends in the summer of 2019. That night it was me, my friends Edward, Will H., Frankie, and Ryland, plus our buddy Spencer, whose house we were spending the night at. Spencer lives on a dirt road wedged between a hiking trail and dense forest. Our plan was simple: hike down to a creek a little ways along the trail, do some late-night fishing, and smoke some weed. Typical dumb teenage fun. Frankie was nervous about going into the woods after dark. A few years earlier, he'd almost been robbed by a homeless guy out there. We talked him into it anyway, assuring him that there were 6 of us this time. Around 11 p.m., we snuck past the living room where Spencer's dad sat yelling at the TV about the Jacksonville Jaguars. I won't use his real name, but we all called him Joey Bonanza. Joe for short. We headed down the trail, talking about sports, girls, school, normal stuff. An hour later, we were set up by the creek. The night was foggy, the water black except where our flashlights hit it. We were all pretty high by then. Ryland was on another planet entirely. We were just talking when we heard a splash from the far side of the creek. We looked over and saw Frankie tossing popcorn from his backpack into the water. We laughed and assumed the sound had been a fish or duck going after the kernels. But Edward and I both noticed something weird. The splashes were coming from upstream, against the current. The popcorn was floating the other way. After a while, we stopped paying attention to it. I wandered over to Frankie and asked why the hell he was throwing popcorn into the water. "'Cause I'm bored, man," he said, "and I'm freaking out a little. Watching it float calms me down." About 30 minutes passed, then we heard more splashing, louder this time. Same spot across the creek. Edward shined his flashlight over there, but a layer of fog hovered over the surface, making it hard to see anything clearly. Through the haze, we could just make out the top of something, like someone's head, barely breaking the water. Our first thought was that somebody was messing with us, then we saw the eyes. They glowed not like normal animal eyes reflecting light, but like they were generating their own. We all stared at each other. "What the hell is that?" someone whispered. Ryland, high as a kite, said, "Maybe you shouldn't have thrown the popcorn in, dumbass. You probably attracted it." Right then, the figure rose out of the water. It kept rising. By the time it was fully standing, it had to be 8 feet tall, humanoid but stretched and wrong, a nightmare yanked out of someone's sketchbook and dropped into the world. We didn't stick around for details. We ditched our weed, left our fishing poles where they were, and bolted back towards Spencer's place. As we ran, the thing let out a noise that didn't sound like any animal I've ever heard, like something was tearing a scream out of its own throat. After 5 straight minutes of sprinting, Spencer's house came into view. "What the fuck was that?" someone yelled. "Did you see its eyes? Don't stop running." We exploded into the front yard just as Spencer's dad burst through the front door, pistol in hand. Without saying a word, he started firing into the tree line, drunk and staggering. One of the shots came close enough to Edward that he felt the air move. We dove onto the porch as Joe spun around, screaming, "What the fuck do you think you're doing? I could have killed one of you." Thought someone was stealing my moonshine again. Turned out Joe had been hiding illegal moonshine out in the woods and was paranoid someone was trying to find his stash. One of the neighbors must have heard the gunshots and his yelling because the cops showed up soon after. They arrested Joe on the spot, no firearms permit, drunk out of his mind. As they led him away, he slurred, "Can you guys check if my moonshine's still there?" I probably wouldn't have ever written this down if it hadn't come up in an Xbox party with Spencer recently. He convinced me to send it in. We've never told anyone else about that night. I don't blame you if you don't believe me. If I hadn't had my friends there, I'd probably think I hallucinated the whole thing, but we were all there, we all saw it. I moved out of Massachusetts not long after, though I still keep in touch with those guys. None of us can explain what we saw at that creek. All I know is I'll never set foot in those woods after dark again. My name is Will Wright. About 7 months after that first story, I sent it in to a show called Creature Encounters, second entry in episode 11, I think. That was the one about the thing my friends and I saw in the woods of Southampton. If you haven't heard it, it's basically what you just read. This is what happened next. Over winter break, my parents surprised me with news that we were going back to my hometown for a week. I managed, after a lot of convincing, to get them to agree to let my girlfriend Taylor come along. We flew out of Florida on an early January morning and landed in Massachusetts that afternoon. For the first few days, Taylor and I had a great time. We met up with my old friends, did the kind of small-town stuff I grew up with, and just enjoyed ourselves. On the 3rd day, Spencer called. He invited me, my buddy Coleman, and my best friend Edward to crash at his place for the night. Same house as before, middle of nowhere, dirt road, surrounded on all sides by forest. I said yes on one condition: I wanted to bring Taylor. Edward asked to bring his girlfriend Morgan too. Spencer grumbled about it at first, but eventually agreed. Somehow I'd managed to forget what had happened in those woods 4 years earlier. How we'd run screaming back to that house and indirectly gotten Spencer's dad, Joey Bonanza, arrested for firing a gun while blackout drunk. That whole incident had overshadowed why we ran in the first place. Edward and Morgan picked Taylor and me up from the rental house and drove us over to Spencer's. We hung out in his backyard, circled around a fire pit, talking and laughing for 3 hours or so as the sky went dark. When the snow started, we moved inside and watched Sunday night football in Spencer's room. We avoided the downstairs TV because Joe was there again, drunk and screaming at the screen about the Jaguars. "Oh, come on, you call that coverage?" he bellowed. "My dead grandma's ass could play better than that. I should be your damn coach." We decided that was our cue to avoid him for the rest of the night. I honestly don't think I've ever seen Joey Bonanza sober, not even at parent-teacher conferences back in the day. After the game ended, we heard the back door slam. We peeked out the window just in time to see Joe stumbling into the garden, still raging about the Jaguars. He started punching a garden gnome over and over. The 4 of us watching from upstairs lost it, laughing, everyone except Spencer anyway. Later that night, Taylor and I slipped into one of the guest rooms for some extracurricular activities. Afterwards, we were lying there half asleep when a weird, distant scream cut through the quiet. We both sat up, we rushed out into the hallway. Spencer and Coleman were already there, faces tight. A second later, from downstairs, we heard Spencer's greyhound, Bullet, erupt into frantic barking at something outside. Edward's bedroom door flew open and he stumbled out completely naked. "Yo, what the fuck was that?" he shouted, eyes wide. We all stared at him. "Edward," I said, "put some pants on." He blinked, realized he was still mid-hookup with Morgan, and retreated back into the room for clothes. Once things calmed slightly, we huddled in the hallway, arguing about what to do. "Can't we just stay up here and play Xbox?" Coleman asked. "Shut up, Coleman," I said. "I'm not scared of whatever's out there. Spencer, go grab your dad's shotgun. Let's go scare this son of a bitch off." Truth is, I was scared, but I didn't want Taylor to see that. I wanted to look like I had things under control. In hindsight, it was a terrible idea. Joe had already been busted once for misusing a firearm, but none of us were thinking about that. Everyone went along with it. Edward, being the most experienced hunter in the group, took the shotgun. He didn't load it. We figured just the sight of the gun would be enough to scare off whoever was lurking. We stepped out into the backyard. "Fuck, it's cold up north," Taylor muttered, shivering. "No shit," Spencer snapped. "It's Massachusetts." "Spencer, shut up," I said. "She's from the south." I wrapped an arm around her. "We'll only be out here a few minutes." "It's okay." Her shaking didn't stop, and it wasn't just from the cold. Mine didn't either, if I'm honest, but I forced myself to walk tall behind Edward and Morgan. We trudged through ankle-deep snow for far longer than the few minutes I'd promised. The woods loomed ahead, the tree line a dark wall. Morgan said finally, "Where the hell is Coleman?" "God damn it," Edward groaned. "I told you all to stay behind me." "He probably wandered off to take a piss," Spencer said. We stopped and started yelling his name into the night, hoping to hear him answer. Edward cut us off with a sharp SHH. We fell quiet. Footsteps crunched somewhere ahead, heavy ones. "Coleman," Spencer called. Edward turned to us, voice low. "That's not Coleman. Those steps are way too big." "How do you know?" Spencer shot back. "Coleman's a big guy." "Who else would it be?" "Shut up and listen," Edward hissed. The footsteps drew closer, slow and deliberate. They sounded like they were only a few feet away. Edward pulled out his phone. As he raised it to turn on the flashlight, everything from 4 years ago came roaring back into my head. The night at the creek, the glowing eyes. That impossible shape dragging itself out of the water. I'd sworn I'd never go back into those woods at night, and there we were with an unloaded shotgun standing on the edge of its territory. Edward tapped the flashlight on. The beam landed on it. What we'd seen at the creek had been a vague outline. This was not. The thing towering in front of us was easily 9 feet tall. Its limbs hung long and thin, joints bending just a little too far. Its skin looked stretched and sickly, like it barely fit over the bones underneath. 2 blazing white eyes stared down at us, bright and unnatural. And its mouth was a vertical tear 2 feet long, lined with needle-like fangs that seemed to go back forever. If hell itself could grin, it would look like that. The instant the light hit it, the creature shrieked. The sound tore through us like a physical force, the loudest, most painful noise I've ever heard. We didn't need to say a word, we ran. Spencer, who ran track in high school, sprinted ahead and reached the house first. He yanked the back door open and stood there screaming at us to hurry. I scooped Taylor up and practically dove through the doorway with her, like I was diving across a goal line. Edward barreled in behind us with Morgan, who was sobbing uncontrollably. Spencer slammed the door and locked it. We all rushed to the nearest window and peered out at the trees. The thing had stopped just at the edge of the yard, glaring at the house. It let out one last, ear-splitting shriek, then turned and slipped back into the forest, swallowed by the darkness between the trunks. Spencer lost it. Coleman's dead, man. "He's dead," he shouted, pacing and pulling at his hair. Edward held tightly to Morgan. Taylor collapsed onto the floor and started crying. I picked her up and hugged her. She immediately threw up all over my shirt. Honestly, she could have done it 10 more times and I wouldn't have cared. We were alive, that was all that mattered. "How do you know Coleman's dead?" I asked Spencer. "Did you see him? Did you see anything happen?" He was too hysterical to answer. We decided to call the cops and headed for Spencer's room to grab his phone. I braced myself for a repeat of 4 years ago, cops, questions, maybe another arrest for Joe. We opened the bedroom door. Coleman was sitting on the floor, a controller in his hands, playing Xbox. "Coleman, you're alive," Edward and Spencer shouted, rushing over and hugging him. I took a step forward, then remembered I was still covered in puke and stopped short. You guys really thought I'd go out there at night? Coleman said, laughing nervously. No way. You're all crazy. Edward's expression flipped from relief to anger. He punched Coleman in the face hard enough to give him a bloody nose. So yeah. That whole mess pretty much ruined Taylor's vacation, but she and I are still together. Somehow. If you live in western Massachusetts, take this as another warning, lock your doors at night. Don't go wandering into the woods after dark. There is something out there, and every night before I go to sleep, I pray I never see it again. There's always a reason to be afraid.